I'm Chris Broder, Executive VP of Brand and Workplace Experience. Caitlin Martin, you can also see is a team member with me, and Carly, you can see a beautiful picture. And she also is in our workplace team, and we're here to assist Emily today in making today's webinar a great experience for everybody. We have had the pleasure, our entire BICO team, of working with Emily over the last 2 years. She is an incredible communications expert and has been seen on every major network and is a correspondent by night or emergency, and runs Speak Eye to Eye with her partner. And it really works with corporate consulting and helps people create a better presentation, help them speak better. And she is here today to help us with that. Just a public announcement. Caitlin will be monitoring your questions in the Q&A, and will interrupt Emily if appropriate to interrupt her and give her your questions that you're asking. And we encourage you guys, we are going to take a week off and enjoy the holiday next week, but we have a great July 10th. And I am blanking right now, Caitlin, on what our July 10th one is. July 9th? I am blanking.
I don't think we've released it yet.
Oh, okay, we haven't released it yet. So don't listen to me. So make sure you check the Flourish website. The calendar is there. Please do encourage your colleagues, if they did miss today, everything will be on the green room and you'd be able to watch it. The presentation will be there as well, or any materials that Emily does give us. So with that, we are going to turn it into speaker mode and turn it over to Emily.
Chris, thank you very much. Thanks to BICO for giving me this chance to continue to communicate. And thanks to all of you for joining as well. I think if there's anything that we have learned over the past few months of talking to our screens and talking to these little tiny circles that are staring back at us, is that communication, really good communication and making a connection, is more important than ever, because we have to do it in different ways. We can't rely on body language as much as we have. It's in this little box, and we have to try to get people to be influenced and connected in new ways. And so I think that though we're probably doing this in different ways, the fundamentals still remain, that if you know what you're trying to communicate, it's a whole lot easier to do so. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you take advantage of those moments when you weren't expecting to necessarily speak, and all of a sudden a lot is on the line and you're having to think on your feet and speak on your feet? I'm going to give you today some surefire ways that I have learned in journalism when I land on a scene and have to very quickly report to people all around the world what's going on. How do I take all this confusion and boil it down? I'm also going to talk about how that has helped me help clients when they are facing everything from a Harvard Business Review Facebook Live that I'll talk about in a little bit, to being on the main stage of a TED Talk, to just leading a meeting with their team and having to get difficult information across and make sure they're communicating it well. 2 things to know, actually 3 things to know. 1, feel free to interrupt anytime. Caitlin is there to take questions. I want to hear from you. 2, if you happen to have any piece of paper, a plain piece of paper or any other one, have it nearby, because we're going to do a quick exercise in a couple of minutes. If you don't, you can watch and see how things go. And the 3rd thing is, I'm going to do a couple of things with a great service that I have used throughout COVID-19 and Zoom screens, that's called Mentimeter. And so with that, I will ask you to text something on your phone. So if you have your phones handy, be ready for that in a couple of minutes. As we get started though, I'm going to share my screen with you. And we're talking about speaking on your feet, being ready for impact. And so as we do this, as I said in the promotion, we're going to get this down to, in many ways, 3 words, boiling your message down to the fundamentals. And so to think on how to speak on your feet, I want to give you an example of how I learned to act in the water. And that was just a couple of days ago. Let me see why this is not sharing. Okay. It was just about a week and a half ago when I was social distancing with my family in Florida. And we decided one of the best ways to social distance was to go out on a boat and go see manatees. This was in Crystal River National Wildlife Sanctuary, a couple of hours from Tampa. And we went in the water and we were floating, and they said, okay, you're just going to go near these manatees. I don't know if any of you have ever been close to them, but a big one weighs about 800 to 1,200 pounds. So when you're floating in the water right above them, you look down and there are these just monstrous but super calm and quiet animals there. And they said, okay, it's really important. These are protected animals. You cannot reach out and touch them. But then they surprised us and they said, well, but if the animals come up close to you, you can have your hand out, be perfectly still, and be ready and see what happens. So, you know, we thought that'll never happen. That will never happen at all. This will be the best that we get. By the way, this is a picture from our trip from a GoPro that we took. So these are two of the manatees that we hung out with a couple of weeks ago. So I want to show you what happened when my kids were there, and all of a sudden our guide said, okay, be ready, here they come. It's a quick video. I'm going to show you one other one. As you see, this manatee just came up. This was the baby, and he wanted to play. It was like hanging out with an 18-month-old child. It just wanted to hang out with you. So I'm going to show you one more. Remember the words, be ready for when they come to you. Oh, hold on, let's go to the next one. This is what happened when they said, be ready.
Don't move. You don't move, you get more attention.
If you heard the guide talking, he said, be ready, don't move. When you don't move, you get more attention. And as I was sitting there, I was just caught up in the moment. It was really remarkable. I even had one that came up to me, this baby, and literally kissed my face mask. It was quite remarkable. But later on, as I was reflecting about it, I thought, this is a lot of what public speaking is. You don't know what to expect. You're just kind of out in the wilderness waiting to see what happens. But you have to be ready to take advantage of the moment when it happens. And that's what a lot of us are not ready to do. Because when it comes to public speaking, there's this big danger zone that's basically, you could get thrown into it at any moment. Your mouth could start engaging before your brain starts engaging. You can lose the opportunity to take advantage of that moment. So what we're going to do today is really say, how do you do what we did with the manatees? How do you have your message ready to go so that you can be still, let it come to you, and then be ready to act and take advantage of the moment? This is important because we really believe, most of us, that this is something we have to do, whether we like public speaking or not. 7 out of 10 people in a Forbes survey said, yeah, presentation skills are critical for career success. If I want to move up the ladder, if I want to influence more people, if I want to lead more people, I'm probably going to have to be a good presenter. 7 out of 10 people believe that. But look at this. In that same survey, 2 out of 10 people said they would honestly do almost anything to avoid getting out of the presentation. They would say, you know what, Chris is really good at this. She's been working on this. Let's let her have it. Or let's let Caitlin do it because she really needs some opportunity. They will find ways to avoid getting out of the presentation, even asking someone else or pretending to be sick. So this is that dichotomy and this tension that we face is we know we should do it. We know it's good for us, but a lot of us just don't really like to do it. Or even if we do, we keep thinking about what those opportunities that we missed to do it better. So, and it's a lot of times easy to say, yeah, I'm not that person. I'm pretty good at being up in front of people. I deal with senior executives all the time who are leaders, who are well compensated, do well at their job. But when it comes to the big moments to speak on their feet, they're ready to punt. They're ready not to get the eyeballs. I said that I would tell you about a Harvard Business Review Facebook Live, and I had a client who's incredibly good at public speaking. In fact, her expertise is talking about how to have that executive presence and how to go in and really make sure that everyone is following you when you're speaking. So she's good at this. She's an expert. But they called her up and said, we would like you to do a Harvard Business Review Facebook Live. She was going to do a whiteboard as part of their series. And we want you to talk about what you're good at and just come up here and do it for an hour. And she called me and said, you have to talk me into doing it because I'm not doing it. And I said, well, why not? You're really good at public speaking. She said, absolutely. That being on camera scares the heck out of me. I don't want to be there and screw up. It's totally different than if I were standing in a room with you right now and I could see your face. She said, I don't want to do that. And I said, okay, you don't have to if you can answer this. And I said, look at how many people watched the last Facebook Live that someone else did. So she looked it up on Facebook and it was about 86,000 people. And so I said, great. Washington National Stadium, for those of you who are in the Washington, D.C. area, has a capacity of about 41,000. So I said, you tell me how you are going to get basically 2 stadiums worth of people to hear your message at one time. And if you can do that, then you don't have to do this Facebook Live. And she said, well, I can't fill up 2 stadiums. And so we had to work at how do we get her message? How do we build her confidence to get her so she could do that? She did it. From that, she not only filled up 2 stadiums worth of people, she filled up more than 4 Washington National Stadiums worth of viewers who viewed that. And from that, she got a book deal because they were so interested in what she said and how well she delivered it. That's what I mean about being ready to speak on your feet. It's really easy to punt and say, yeah, I don't think this is the time for me. I don't think this is the opportunity. What are you giving up when you don't take advantage of this? And so that's why I want you to get involved today and really face your fears and talk about it. So right now, if you could grab your phone, go to menti.com, MENTI.com, and use this code. You're just going to put in 115478. I'll do it with you. I just want to know in a couple of words, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to being a really good communicator? And especially if you want to zoom in on, think about public speaking, think about what you are facing right now, maybe in eternal Zoom meetings. What do you find is the biggest challenge? We should be able to watch your responses come up live on the screen as we do this. So I'm just going to pause for a second. Finding the right message in real time. Absolutely. It's really hard when your brain is turning very, very quickly to land on the right thing and start to influence. That's a really huge challenge. Losing your train of thought because that wheel is continually moving and you're looking for the right message. You can do that. Getting out of your own head is so big. The person who says, oh, I wish I hadn't said that word. That's the word that bothers my boss. Or, oh, what's going on? Do I have lipstick in my teeth, right? All of those things. Not staying on topic, slowing down, being concise, slowing down again, not speaking so quickly, filling space, articulating it clearly. I'm going to keep seeing what's popping up here. And if they don't all pop up, we can continue. I can send you this later to see what you all have to say. You can see that no matter how good you all are, and I know because you care about this and you're taking an hour out of your busy day during this crazy time, that this is something you're good at and want to get better. You can see that we all have these challenges, especially when it comes to having to think quickly, not do the presentation that you've been working on all week. And this is where I want you to grab a piece of paper if you have one, because all of those things that you were talking about, the voice in our head, the difficulty in landing on a concise message, all of that's hard because there's a lot of things that get in the way of us communicating with each other. Right now, it may be just that it's a screen and that we are tired of looking at screens for 10 hours a day. But there are other things that come into play. So if you have a piece of paper, I would love for you to grab it right now. I can't see all of you. So if I can't see you and you have it, we're just going to talk about it. If you don't have a piece, I want you to just imagine how you would do this, and because this is something you can take to your team. If you have a piece of paper, close your eyes and listen to what I have to say and just follow my directions as best as you can. So right now, grab your paper, close your eyes, and fold your piece of paper in half. Fold it in half and tear off the upper right-hand corner. Doesn't have to be pretty. Keep your eyes closed. Tear off the right-hand corner. Okay, I want you to fold it in half one more time. This time, tear off the bottom left corner. Bottom left. Keep your eyes closed for just one more set of directions. Fold your paper in half. Tear off the upper left corner, and then you can open your eyes. I know it's hard to tear that third time. The paper starts to get thick. So listen, as a communicator, I gave you pretty simple instructions. Close your eyes, fold your paper, tear it, fold your paper, tear it, fold it for a third time and tear it, right? As a communicator, it's pretty simple. So if you all have the piece of paper and you unfold it, I'm wondering if your paper looks exactly like mine. I'm looking at a couple of examples and nobody's really looks like mine at all, right? And I have done this all over the world with thousands of people, and I have yet to have anyone do exactly what I tell them to do. And I think what's scary about that is you think, how clear could I be? How could you people not follow what I'm saying? When the truth is, it's not your fault, it's my fault. I wasn't showing you what I was doing. I wasn't giving you a chance for feedback. And I wasn't taking into account that though I knew in my head exactly what you were supposed to do, you were coming into this cold and had no idea of where to go with this. It seems pretty simple when it's a quick folded and torn paper exercise. It's a lot more complicated in real life. When you've been working with your executive team on a big program that you're going to roll out, and you've worked intensely for 2 months on this, and you tell people about it, and you assume that they're at the same point that you are, but this is the first time they're hearing about it. You really can get into that same world of, you're like, why are you not seeing this? And they're thinking, where are you going with this, right? So you've got to be really concise and clear with your message. Basically, you have to move from the what, hey, just tear, fold, and tear, to why are we doing this? Help people understand and bring them along. This is a quick example of how I did this reporting. If you look at this picture, you probably recognize what this is. Hurricane Katrina, one of the most deadly storms that's impacted us certainly in recent years. And with Hurricane Katrina, if I was reporting on that, I have different ways that I could do that. I could do it completely factually. I could tell you more than 1 million people were displaced, and that there were a lot of pets that were stranded, and that there were people in hurricane relief shelters. There's nothing wrong with doing this. This is a basic PowerPoint, right? That's basically shoving information at people. This is what Hurricane Katrina is. Maybe I'm saying that may not sink in with people. That may bore them a little bit. So I'm gonna jazz it up a little bit. I'm gonna show them some graphics. This is a graphic that actually shows you by the intensity of the red where people actually went to evacuation centers, right? So you can look at that and say, you can kind of tell that as people were going, they went to where they could go first, right? It was easier to get to different places in Louisiana or Texas than maybe going up to Wisconsin. So it starts to give you an idea. I want you to look at this little thing that says DC1, because this is where the story is that I want to tell you about how we move from what. And as a journalist, my bias is to tell what? It's to tell you facts and to say, I want you to understand this very, very factually. But the day that I had to do this story about that one center, it was at the Washington, D.C. Armory. And when I was there, I thought I was going to tell the story of what all these people who were evacuated and what their life was like. But instead, my bosses said, no. Shaquille O'Neal is coming to visit today. And we want you to do a story about Shaquille O'Neal cheering people on. And I thought, it's really great. It's really great that Shaquille O'Neal is doing this. But I think these people have lost so much. There's a deeper story to tell. So I was arguing for that. And I didn't win. I had to tell the story of Shaquille O'Neal, but my compromise was while I was there, I noticed this little gentleman that was in a wheelchair and he was holding a sign. And if we had more time, I would show you the story. And if you're interested in seeing the story, email me at the end of this and I'll send you a copy of it. But basically this man was holding a sign that said, "Help me find my dog." And it turned out that his name, Craig Peel, he was alone in the world, had to evacuate from New Orleans. And at the very last minute, they said, "You can't bring your dog." So he had to hand his dog off to someone that was in the street and just say, "Please take care of my dog." And he was sitting at this armory. He didn't care that he didn't have a home. He didn't care that he didn't have money. He wanted to know where his dog was. So I told that story of what it's like for an evacuee to lose the thing that matters most to them. I used those facts that you saw earlier. I used these facts to introduce my story, but then I told why it mattered. Guess what happened when that happened? I took this kind of silly, almost dog story, and it was the first story I'd ever had. Keep in mind, this was 12 years ago. It went viral, and people started saying, "We've got to help this man. We've got to help him." And you know what? It turned out that someone who saw this story in Minnesota knew someone who was in Arizona, who knew someone in New Orleans, and we were able to get that dog Sassy, and this was the moment that we reunited. I moved from telling what, here are all the facts, to telling why it mattered. Look at what happened to this man when his greatest wish went out into the world and was granted. You may say, "Well, that's nice, but I can't do that. I'm in business. I have to have bigger results than that." I want to show you why this was more than a warm and fuzzy story. And I didn't discover this until a couple of years ago. I was speaking at a crisis communication seminar, and there was someone from FEMA, and I was talking about this story, and they said, "We know that story." And I said, "Really? You remember this story from 10 years ago?" She said, "No. I remember it because we used the story of Craig Peel and Sassy to help push the HR 3858 Pets Evacuation and Transportation Standards Act of 2006. Basically, this is a law that says right now, if you had to have an emergency evacuation, there had to be some kind of a system in place so that your animal could be taken care of, and you may not be in the same space as Craig Peel. This was a major legislative change that my guess is could impact someone you or someone you know if God forbid there was ever an emergency. And it was done because we told the story of Craig Peel beyond just the facts, but telling people why it mattered. When you start to talk about the why, you start to make a difference. This is a source of a poll. It says, listen, if you tell people facts alone, like I did in that #1 part of the story, you're going to make a little bit of a difference, but you tell facts plus the stories, you tell them why, look how that grows exponentially in terms of influencing people. People 300 times more likely to buy into what you're doing when they understand why you're doing it, instead of saying, this is what's happening. Think about it in terms of COVID right now. If you say, instead of, we need you to stay home for 1 more month, they might be asking why. If you say, because we are doing this, we're waiting for this threshold to be passed, you help them understand the why in it, they're going to be more likely to buy in. That is when you talk about why your brain connects with storytelling, it's so much stronger than PowerPoint. It's so much stronger to tell people why. So right now you're thinking, okay, I get it. I've got to tell stories, but how do I do that? How do we answer those questions that so many of you said was a problem in terms of keeping it short, keeping on topic, making it happen? I'm going to give you something that I've learned in journalism and I have shared with almost every client that I've worked with. It sounds simple, but it can work magic for what you're doing. And for that, you're going to talk about the 3 little pigs. If we were in a room together, I would talk to you about, we would tell the story together. But basically, you know, there was a story of 3 pigs. One went out into the world. He built his house out of straw. And the big bad wolf came and huffed and puffed and blew it down. Then the second wolf came, or the second pig came, built it out of sticks. Same result. Third pig said, I'm going to work a little harder. I'm going to build my house out of bricks. And when he did, the wolf huffed and the wolf puffed. And as you know, that house stayed standing, right? In the end, the wolf could not beat that third pig. So that's a really simple story that I told in a really simple way, but I want you to boil it down even more and say, if you had to tell the story that I just told you and sum it up in 3 words, what would those words be? Maybe it would be build with bricks. Maybe you are a lobbying company that has a brick layers for the client, and your message is basically, here's the story of the 3 little pigs. The lesson is build with bricks. But that is not the only 3 words that could define the story. Does anybody else have a different take with 3 words on what that story that I just told you had for a takeaway or as a lesson? I'd love for you to weigh in. Maybe unmute yourself and let me know if there's another 3 words that you could think of different than advocating for bricks.
If you all put it in the chat, we would be able to see it.
I see it popping up here. Build for keeps. Absolutely. You know, you could go and do the easy way, but is that really going to help you out? Absolutely. Thomas, thanks for weighing in on that. Build for keeps. Don't just make it the cheapest necessarily, make it happen. What about if you could tell me a story about working hard or perseverance? Anybody have one that might work for that? Got more?
Practice makes perfect.
Practice makes perfect. Absolutely. You know, we don't always get it right the first time. So it's okay to fail and to keep working. Learn from others. Same idea. Really powerful. In fact, I've worked with Biko talking about, you know, how it's okay to make mistakes as long as you're making the mistakes and learning from them. The 3 little pigs may be a perfect story to help people understand that given in that way. Other people might say, talking about pigs outsmart wolf, that it's okay to be the little guy if you can be cunning and think about how can I keep this David and Goliath situation from happening, right? So there could be a lesson in saying, it's okay that you're the little company. We can beat the big guys because we have ingenuity and we are able to pivot, right? That could be the story. In Washington, when I talk about this story, many times groups that are advocacy groups will say something like, who allowed straw, right? Maybe you're looking to say with the government, what went wrong here? Who was the person who said it was okay to build with straw? Why are building codes so lax? So there are so many different ways, as you see, that this one story could have a way to tell it and a purpose, the why you want to tell them. The thing is, though, if I'm speaking to your group and talking about 3 little pigs, I don't want to say build with bricks and perseverance pays off and who allowed straw and smart outweighs might. You know, I can't tell you all those things because you'd walk away saying, what was that story about again? I don't know. If you can get it down to 3 words, you can have that basis. So when your mind is worrying and you're thinking, how do I answer this question? How do I get out of this spot? You think about, what are the 3 words? Build with bricks. And then you can start to explain why you build with bricks. It automatically gets you in your lane and helps you focus. I use this all the time when I'm in a complicated story. Do I want to focus on the investigation? Do I want to focus on what's unknown? Do I want to focus on the victims? I know the 3 words, and that helps me stay focused. So I want you to take a shot now at trying this, talking about COVID, right? When you talk about COVID, it has impacted all of our lives in so many different ways that if you had to tell your grandchildren about this in 40 years, how would you describe what it's like right now, right? Let alone if you had to talk to your team on Monday about what it's like and how you're reacting to this. It's a really, really complicated story with so many facets. But I want you to think about, what could the 3 words of COVID be? So we're going to do Menti one more time. You're going to do the same thing. Go to menti.com and use this code. I want to know, what's the biggest 3-word lesson? And if you need to do 4 or 5, it's okay, that you've learned from COVID-19. If there's one thing that we can take away from all of this? What do you think it is? I want you to start to think about how to focus your story. It should start to pop up. It's really tough to think about this. Wash your hands. Absolutely. Wonderful but scary. That's a really interesting, or scary but wonderful. I'm not sure the order that it came in, but that there is a truth in that. I was talking with Chris before we got on about how our kids are learning to do just playtime in ways that they haven't before. Stressful, adaptation, resilience, right? These are really powerful words. Family, scary, appreciation, no touch, distance. This is really fascinating. Resilience, strengthened, patience, right? All of these things are really fascinating. I did this, I want to keep, as your words are coming in, I want you to think about this as you're talking with your teams, as you're maybe doing your next team meeting over Zoom. Instead of just saying, hey, how's everybody doing? You might want to say, what's the biggest thing that you're feeling right now? Give me a 3-word takeaway. And people might start telling you things that are very different. I mean, if you just look at what all of you are saying, there are words like adaptation and resilience, which is kind of like the 3 little pigs, the little guys taking on the big one. You can do this. This is good. To maybe words like distance and weaknesses and no touch, where people are saying, I just feel really alone here, right? Those are different kinds of feelings and different stories that you may have to start addressing. This can help you connect with your team. It can help you connect with your clients. It can also help you focus on when somebody says, hey, John, I really need you to speak at the next team meeting about how your team is doing and how you're adapting. And you're thinking, I don't know what I'm going to say. What am I going to do? You can say, what's my 3 words? Come up with what that is, and then talk for a couple of minutes about it. It's so much easier than just saying, okay, I'll just start talking and I end up not really knowing where I'm going. 3 words can help you focus. I want you to try it. I want you to use it. Let me know how it works. So that's what the first part is. Know what your story is, keep it so simple, and then you can start to build it back out again. Then you got to sell it, and you've got to be bold when you're doing this, because nobody wants a story that you're like, I think this is what it is, right? You've got to be in there and jump in and ready to go. So what I want to talk about for the next few minutes, before I take any other questions that you have, is how do you start to communicate your story more effectively? You've got to be bold. Let me tell you, that first triangle is the world that most of us live in. I'm going to keep going and tell you stuff and get to it and eventually get to the point. This is how lawyers talk. This is how a lot of academics talk, because they're working to prove their point. I work a lot with scientists at Fortune 500 companies. They almost all live in that first triangle where they're giving me lots of information and eventually they get to the point. I don't know how many of you have kids, but I have a 13-year-old who's a pro. He thinks at that first triangle because he's like, hey, I don't know what you're thinking. Maybe we're going to be doing this, but maybe we could get to this and you could buy me that pair of shoes, right? But by the time he's wandering in all that red at the top, I'm already deciding he wants something and I probably don't want to give it to him. However, if he can flip that triangle and say, here's the thing, I need a new pair of shoes. What I've found is I've looked online, and he keeps going down the triangle. I found the best deal. This is why I think we should order this pair. I'm much more likely to follow along with his argument. The other part is, if you forget, like some of you said, your biggest challenge is forget where you're going with the story. The problem with triangle 1 is you can get lost in the middle and never tell people where you're going. If you start on triangle 2 and start off with, this is what we believe. This is a time COVID has taught us resilience. You start off with that. Then if you get a little off track later on, it doesn't matter because you've told us where you're going. If you've told us your main point, it's okay if we have to cut off a little bit of this. Draw these triangles, start to look at how you're communicating, start to look at how others around you are communicating, and see, are you being bold? Or are you trying to kind of back into it? And that's going to help your effectiveness if you can start with the point. To be bold, you've got to take away some of these words. When you say what you mean and then say, does that make sense? Or I think we should probably do this. Is that okay? Like I said, again, those people who say again and again and again, you're like, I got it the first time. You're diluting your point every time. Take these words out. Take out some of the jargon that we use because we think our industry needs to hear it. The operationalize, the let's noodle on this. Let's think outside the box. Let's take this offline and realize what you're really saying is, I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion right now. Can we think about it and come back tomorrow with what we want to do, right? Be clear. It may make you feel good to say, we're going to drill down on this, but instead say, we've got to decide what we're doing in 15 minutes before we get this email off. What's it going to be? Be bold in cutting out these words that really don't matter and getting to what really does. There's a lot of problems that go along with presentations. You were good about outlining them at the beginning. It's hard to talk. It's really hard to talk on something like this that's recorded, because if I say something wrong, it's out there for eternity, right? It's really scary because we're communicating in different ways than ever. So I want you to think of these 5 words and ways that you can take one thing away. I don't want you to do every one of these every time. I want you to focus on one of these that I outline over the next couple of minutes to help you be more bold when you are doing. I want you to take the word speak, and you're either going to smile, pause, energize, analyze, or know. By that, I mean this. Speak. Be genuine. Use your emotion appropriately. Speak conversationally. I have a smile. Like, it is nice to just be friendly, but also if you're telling people that you've just had the worst quarter in company history and that there are going to be furloughs coming, you don't want to be happy about that. You don't want to say, it's great to see everyone here, but unfortunately we're going to have to let 20% of you go, right? That's not what I mean about being a smiley emoji. But I want you to remember that everyone on that screen has emotions and is a person and wants to hear how you are communicating. If you look at case studies of what has happened throughout COVID, many articles have been very complimentary of Marriott's CEO, talking about the toughest time they've had and being very, very clear, saying, this is hard. We've never had anything like this, but you need to see me talking about this and know here's what we're doing, right? It wasn't smiley and happy, but it was direct. And many advertisers and media consultants said that's what you want to do. When you are delivering tough news, you want to get into the emotion. When you are complimenting people because they've been working hard and they've pulled something off, let yourself do that. Don't get stuck in the jargon. Speak conversationally with them. This is pause. It is okay when someone puts you on the spot and you have to talk, to take a quick pause and think about, what am I going to say? What are my 3 words? You can get that in 2 breaths and no one else will know, but you keep your confidence and you keep your presence. So take that deep breath. It slows your body down. Get your 3 words. Remember, what's your key message? And how are you going to get to it? It's much easier to support your 3 words than to talk and talk and talk and hope you come to your point. The other thing that you can do to pause is it's okay to ask someone a question back. If someone said to me, if Caitlin said, Emily, I need you to talk for 3 minutes about what your team is doing and how you're addressing COVID differently, while I'm thinking about it, I could say, give me an example of what do you want out of this? How do we want to use that message to inspire others? So while you're finding out more information to help your message clarify, you're also buying yourself some time. So it's okay to ask for a little bit more to gather your thoughts. That's the S and the P. The E is energize. You've got to engage when you're speaking, and this is so critical. You've got to engage when you're not speaking. If you can, put that video camera on you, even if you're in a ponytail, even if you've just come from a workout, even if your kids are running around behind you or your dog is barking, especially in times of Zoom. Engage, let people see your face. Can you imagine if I were doing this webinar off camera and all you saw was just the screen? It's boring. We're taking away that. I would never go give a presentation to the board standing behind the lectern underneath it, right? Where nobody could see me. Get out there and engage with people and try to keep your eyes on that screen with them. Look them in the eyes in that little box as much as you can. Try not to be spending that time checking your email and flipping through, because it does take away energy. You've got to use your space more than you've ever used it before. You might grab props. You might say, look, I've got 2 pens. Here's what's different. This is what life was like pre-COVID. This is life after COVID. We've got to get simpler, you know, whatever. Use stuff to help engage people. Use your body language and your tone to help tell your story. SPE. A is analyze. You've got to understand your audience. When I spoke with Chris a couple of days ago, I said, tell me who's going to be on this. What is it that people have responded to in the past? What do they need, right? Understand what it is, because if everyone here has never given a public speech before, it might be a different thing than if you're senior leaders, right? So understand what your audience is wanting from you. What's the best way to convey that message? I think finding a story that no one has heard before that helps frame what you're talking about can really help do it. You saw the facts, you saw the studies that say that stories help people understand, engage, and have impact. And look for feedback opportunities. Maybe you want to use polls to do it. It's hard to ask people to unmute and have that moment of silence on Zoom. But if you're just talking and have no idea if people are following along, it's critical. That's a big challenge when we're talking online, but it still happens in a presentation as well, in the traditional pre-March way, right? If you're in front of a room with your team, take a moment to say, so what does everybody think of this? Or how have you had an example of this? Ask them to be engaged in this, so you're analyzing to make sure they're getting what you're doing and it's worth both of your time. No. Look, when you speak on your feet, you can't always rehearse. It would be nice if you could, but you don't always get to. But here's what you can do. Go into tough meetings thinking like me, think like a reporter. What's my boss going to find is a sticking point? What do they not like that I better be able to answer preemptively? What are the things that are going to make people uncomfortable? If I'm saying this was the worst quarter that we've had since the Great Recession, they're probably not going to be comfortable with me stopping there. They're going to say, how does that impact us? Are we going to be facing pay cuts? Are we going to be facing losses? People want to know this stuff. And so don't assume that you can just say it and people will accept it and stop there. You have to be ready to take on the tough stuff. Build upon your experience. Yeah, we're in uncharted territories, but if you can say, here's what we did the last time we faced something like this, and here's how we got through it, or here's what we've seen other companies do, and we're working with that. But you don't have to know exactly the answer to a question, but you can tell them the process of how you're getting there, and it makes it so much more comfortable. Answer in the affirmative. Instead of saying, we don't know if people are going to lose jobs, that doesn't make people feel very good, right? You can say, we are doing everything we can to help people keep their jobs. Here's what we are doing. You can answer in terms of what you are positively taking action while not being too rosy, right? You've got to be honest with people, but answer in the affirmative. When Richard Nixon said, I'm not a crook, most people didn't, a lot of people didn't accept that. They said, well, if you say you're not a crook, you probably are a crook, right? If your kids say, I didn't eat that cookie, there's a pretty good chance you can find some crumbs on their lips that say they did. And the other thing is, say what you need to say and then stop. If you truly don't know if there are going to be layoffs, if you just had a meeting and you were talking about it and it's looking like it might happen, but maybe it won't, there's this deal that might be closed, don't tell them all that you can't. And the more that you try to dance around it and say what you can't say, the more it's confusing, the more it sounds like you're not a leader who knows what you're talking about, and the more it can create that swirl. So say, we are doing everything we can to get to the bottom of this. We're going to let you know next week what our process is. Stop. Don't keep telling them more because it actually can create more chaos. 3 words may be the best, 3 words with a little bit more, and then don't try to keep it going, right? It's kind of like if you think of a breakup. People sometimes just want to say, I don't think it's working. You know, you don't need to keep going for 2 hours about why it's not and what the thought process was. It's say what you need to say and then stop. That's speak. And just a couple of final thoughts for you is speaking on your feet is hard, right? When Neil Armstrong spoke, there's a story that says he really didn't know what exactly he was going to say. His wife had said, have you thought about this? And he's like, yeah, I've thought about it, but I'm not really sure. Legend has it that he really did not know what he was going to say exactly until he stepped onto the surface of the moon. If that's a true story, boy, he hit it out of the park, right? He got it right. But do you want to trust that you can just pull something like that out of thin air? You know, it's a pretty risky thing to do that makes you pretty nervous. So don't look for those Neil Armstrong moments. Think about what you're going to do when you have to speak on your feet to be ready. Take them on a journey. You're walking them through why this matters. What do they already know? Why do you care about this? What's in it for you and what's in it for them? That's a way that can help you very quickly think about how to take your message and get people engaged. Another way to do it is think of it like a detective, right? We've got a problem here and we're trying to figure out how we're going to solve it. Here was the moment when we said, we've got something here and here's what we're going to do about it, right? A lot of life is just, here's our problem, here's our solution, or here's our problem, here's how we're trying to find a solution. A very simple framework like that can help you lead people through a story when you're not exactly sure where it's going to go. And my final thought for you is that there's no one good way to do a talk. Basically, everything you do has to offer something fresh and something no one's seen before. Don't do it like me because you're not me. You don't have your experiences. I can't do it like you because I'm not you and I don't have your experiences. When I do keynote speech writing for people or I help people give some of the biggest addresses of their life, we look at what makes them special. We talk about that experiment that they did that they didn't think would work and it didn't work for 6 years and then something did. I worked with a songwriter who was talking and she said, hey, you know that song that makes you feel like you can just run an extra mile, or if you're really mad, you can turn it up in the car and feel better. She said, I'm going to tell you my song. And she stood there with a guitar and she played a little bit of a verse. And then she said, you know why that song makes me feel better? Because I wrote it and it's nominated for a Grammy, right? Like I could never give a speech like that, but she could, and it engaged the whole room of people who were not country songwriters, right? Look at what makes it special for you, and that will help it connect. It has to be your words. I found that out when we went to Glacier National Park a couple of years ago, and this was our guide named Emily, and Emily was a character. She was in control of all of us on the water. She would tell us what to do. She would tell us stories. She told us if you're sitting on the edge, you're taking up too much space. Like Emily was someone who spoke out. But when we talk about being bold, I said, you know, what's it like being in charge like that? And she said, you know, sometimes it makes me so mad. This other day, I was telling directions and there was a guy in my boat who was basically mansplaining. And I would say what to do and he would say, hey, what she means is this. And he would explain it to everybody. And she said he kept doing it the entire full day journey. And she said, I sat there so mad that I wasn't speaking up about it. I was so angry. And I look back on that and I think, why did I stay silent? I had the message. I let him take over. And I think I want you to be like Emily. And remember, if you don't tell your story, somebody else will. There is always going to be someone who interprets what's being said and takes control of it. I would so much rather have it be you than have it be the guy who is mansplaining for Emily. Emily was perfectly capable of speaking for herself. The regret she felt was that she did not speak on her feet, take control, and make that impact that she was capable of doing. So this is how you can reach me. If you have questions about this, if you want to try to tackle something, absolutely feel free to reach out to me anytime. But we have a couple of minutes if anyone has thoughts about how you can take this and apply it to making the best impact when you're speaking. Happy to talk.
Thanks, Emily. You can put your questions in the chat room or if you raise your hand, Caitlin and I can see you and we can unmute you if anybody has any questions. While we are awaiting a few questions, Emily, do you want to unshare your screen?
Yep.
I did want to throw out there, I know Emily talked a lot about it during this wonderful presentation. Feedback is critical. And for us to do the very best we can for our customers, we really need to know how we could do it better. Are there topics that we haven't covered that you would like to hear? This topic today actually came from feedback from one of our customers, very interested in how to handle presentations and speaking in a different manner. And we were so happy that someone told us, hey, we want this, and we had the perfect person to help us. So it looks like we have a few questions, and I would love for Caitlin to jump in there and throw them out.
Well, thank you so much. So we have a question here from Melissa. Do you have any books that you recommend reading about thinking on your feet in public speaking?
In terms of books, I find that actually I would search Harvard Business Review and search public speaking because they're going to be very quick, digestible things. I like that you can get a different perspective from a lot of different people instead of one book. I haven't found that one magic book that I like. So a Harvard Business Review, search public speaking, you'll get some great ideas. You saw I referenced a couple of them. There's also one that I would take a step further because we know a lot of what causes us stress is when we know that we're going to have to speak on our feet about difficult conversations. And Chris and Caitlin and Carly know we've talked about this a lot with Biko. Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most is a book by Douglas Stone. He's with the Harvard Business Negotiation Project. And I think that book is really great for helping you get prepared to go into difficult situations, because that's where a lot of our public speaking is, knowing that people are going to challenge us, that they're going to say, I don't think you're right. That causes stress. So I think that book is taking it to the next level. If you've already got the calmness in speaking down, start preparing yourself for taking on those things that don't feel as comfortable.
It's a great book, and so is Crucial Conversations. They're very similar, but yeah, they definitely help you outline how to speak on your feet. Caitlin, any more questions?
I think that's it for the questions. We have some kudos for Emily, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us today. Emily, we appreciate you participating in the Flourish programming. We look to do many more things with you. Hopefully we'll do some workshops in the coming months. And we thank everybody for being a participant today. Again, reach out to your workplace experience manager if they haven't reached out to you yet. Sorry about that. And give them your feedback, and also let us know what you guys would like to see. Thanks again, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Thanks for your time, everyone. Great to be with you.
Bye-bye.